A Chicago judge with a 28-year career mocked a convicted woman who prayed the Virgin Mary's rosary inside the courtroom. What happened 12 hours later challenged everything he believed about justice and truth, a miracle of the Virgin Mary that no one can explain. But before we continue, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. You know, that kind of teacher who walks into a room and everyone stops talking? Harrison Webb had that effect, but multiplied by 3, 56 years old, perfectly combed gray hair, suit always immaculate, and that way of looking at you as if he were reading every lie you've ever told in your life. 28 years as a judge. People didn't like him. They respected him, fearfully. That Tuesday morning, the hearing was already on its third case when the defense attorney was trying to explain why his client deserved bail. "Your Honor, my client has deep roots in the community." Counsel. Harrison didn't even lift his eyes from the papers. "Your client has 3 prior convictions. Next argument." The attorney opened his mouth, closed it, checked his notes as if the answer might magically appear. No next argument, then bail denied. Next case. Have you ever seen someone dismantle a person's life in 30 seconds? Harrison did that before his coffee got cold. 6:15 in the evening. Last hearing finished. Harrison put the documents back into his folder, nodded to the bailiff without looking, and left. Empty courthouse hallways, echoing footsteps. 20 minutes later, he was in his apartment. The building's doorman waved. "Good evening, Mr. Webb." Harrison nodded back. He didn't know the man's name. 3 years working there, and Harrison didn't know his name. Inside, everything exactly as he had left it that morning. Quiet, organized, empty. Harrison dropped the folder on the couch, went straight to the kitchen, opened the fridge, 3 stacked containers of frozen meals. He grabbed one without reading the label, threw it in the microwave. While waiting, he checked work emails on his phone resting against the counter. Have you ever seen someone running on autopilot for so long they don't even notice anymore? Harrison once had a wife, Margaret, 15 years together. She was an architect, liked making Sunday dinners, and laughed at things he never found funny. One Saturday morning, Margaret was sitting at the kitchen table when he came downstairs. "I can't do this anymore." Harrison thought it was about the dishes he let pile up, or the dinner with her parents he canceled. "I'm living alone inside a marriage, Harry, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not." The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks later. Harrison signed everything without really reading it. She kept the house. He bought the apartment. Emma Lawson woke up at 5:30 that morning with her stomach in knots. 34 years old, principal of a school in Chicago for 10 years. She was the kind of person who remembered every teacher's birthday, who stayed after hours helping parents with enrollment paperwork, who knew the janitor's dog's name and asked how he was doing. And now she was lying on the pull-out couch in her sister's apartment because she couldn't afford rent with her savings frozen by the investigation. The trial had started 2 weeks earlier. Every day was torture. The prosecutor presented document after document, witness after witness. Everything pointing to her. The evidence is very strong. David, the public defender in his 30s, with the face of someone who had slept 3 hours, stared at the papers in front of him. "But I didn't do it." "I know that's what you're saying." "David, I did not do it." He sighed and finally looked at her. "The prosecutor is offering a deal, 3 years. With good behavior, you're out in 18 months. I'm not going to confess to something I didn't do." David didn't answer. He just went back to looking at the papers. Emma watched her life being dismantled piece by piece as she sat in that chair, unable to do anything. Thursday. The jury had gone out to deliberate at 2 in the afternoon. It was 5:30 now, and Emma was still sitting in the same chair, hands intertwined so tightly her knuckles were white. She hadn't eaten anything all day because every time she tried, her stomach flipped. Harrison Webb was in his chair reading another case. He didn't even glance in her direction. Emma closed her eyes, trying only to breathe. Her hand went to the blazer pocket and touched the cold beads of the rosary that had belonged to her grandmother, blue glass worn down from so many prayers. Emma slowly took the rosary out, cupped her hands around it, and began praying softly. Hail Mary, full of grace. The gavel slammed so loudly she jumped. Ms. Lawson? Emma opened her eyes and realized everyone was looking at her. Harrison Webb stared at her with the expression that made seasoned attorneys sweat. This is a court of law. His voice cut like a blade. Not a chapel. Put that away. Someone laughed quietly in the gallery. Another person coughed to cover it. Emma felt her face burn. Tears came before she could stop them. She shoved the rosary back into her pocket with trembling hands. My apologies, Your Honor. Harrison struck the gavel again. The jury remains in deliberation. We return tomorrow at 2 p.m. Dismissed. Emma could barely stand from that chair. Her legs wouldn't hold properly. Rachel came running from the gallery and grabbed her arm. Come on, let's go. Emma left the courtroom with the rosary pressed deep in her pocket, and tears she no longer even tried to hide. At the door, they crossed paths with a man in a gray suit. Brian Mitchell. He was there, watching, just as he had every day of the trial. When his eyes met Emma's, he smiled. 10:40 at night. Harrison was on the couch with Emma Lawson's case file open on his lap. He didn't need to reread it. He already knew every page, every document, every testimony. But he read it anyway, because something bothered him. He couldn't identify what. The evidence was solid. The case was clear. Emma Lawson had access, opportunity, motive, but something. Harrison closed the folder, took it to the bedroom, placed it on the nightstand as he always did, brushed his teeth, put on his pajamas, lay down. 3 a.m. Harrison woke up. It wasn't a slow awakening, it was all at once. Eyes open, heart racing for no reason. And then he felt it. Roses. The smell was so strong and so real that he sat up in bed immediately and turned on the light, looking for the source. Closed window, closed door, air conditioner off. But the scent stayed intense, impossible to ignore. Harrison got up and walked through the apartment, trying to understand where it was coming from. Living room. Kitchen. The smell was everywhere or followed him wherever he went. Harrison stopped in the middle of the living room, wearing pajamas and barefoot, trying to find a logical explanation. The entire apartment smelled of fresh roses, as if someone had just filled every room with bouquets. But there were no flowers. There never had been. The scent lingered for minutes that felt like hours. Then suddenly it stopped. 1 second it was there. The next, it had vanished completely. Harrison went back to the bedroom, lay down, stared at the ceiling until the alarm went off without having slept a single minute. Friday morning. He went to the shower, stayed under the hot water for 15 minutes, trying to really wake up. Coffee, strong, burning his tongue. He sat at the kitchen table with the mug in his hand, staring at the white wall. He couldn't stop thinking about the scent. A leak? No. Gas doesn't smell like roses. Cleaning product? The janitor doesn't come in the middle of the night. Too real to be a dream, too impossible to be real. There had to be an explanation. There always was. 9:27. The phone rang. Judge Webb. Your Honor, Prosecutor Henderson. Henderson, what is it? I need to speak urgently about the Lawson case. Harrison looked at the clock. The sentencing is in a little while. Is something wrong? Catherine Ross woke up. Harrison stopped walking in the hallway. Who? Catherine Ross, administrative secretary at the school. She's worked with Emma Lawson for 8 years. Henderson took a deep breath. She had a serious accident 6 months ago. She has been in a coma ever since. She woke up during the early hours of today. Harrison felt something cold run down his spine during the early hours. Go on. A friend went to visit Catherine at the hospital this morning. Catherine was awake, lucid. The doctors are stunned. The friend told Catherine about Emma's trial. Catherine became desperate. She said she needs to testify that she can prove Emma is innocent. Harrison didn't answer. Your Honor, is she lucid enough? The doctors confirmed it. Catherine is asking to testify before the verdict. She says it's urgent. Set up a video conference. Yes, sir. Harrison hung up, stood there, staring at the phone. Catherine Ross wakes up from a 6-month coma during the early hours. He wakes up at 3 a.m. with the smell of roses. Same night. Coincidence. It had to be. But something in the back of his mind, something he had buried decades ago under logic and reason, whispered that it wasn't. 2 in the afternoon. The courtroom was packed with people who shouldn't even be there, but the news had spread too fast. Emma walked in with Rachel. She sat in the chair beside David, pale. Dark circles even deeper, hands trembling, and Harrison saw she had the blue rosary in her hand again. This time, he didn't say anything. He struck the gavel. Before the jury presents the verdict, a witness has come forward and needs to be heard. Catherine Ross will testify via video conference. Murmurs burst through the room. Harrison struck the gavel again, demanding silence. The large screen in the courtroom lit up, revealing a pale woman lying in a hospital bed, but her eyes were clear and focused in a way that left no doubt she knew exactly what she was doing there. Ms. Ross, do you work with Emma Lawson? I've worked with her for 8 years, Your Honor. Do you have information about the document tampering that occurred between March and July of last year? Catherine looked straight into the camera. The entire courtroom held its breath. Emma Lawson did not tamper with any documents. The courtroom exploded in murmurs. Harrison struck the gavel, demanding order before Catherine could continue. Explain. It was Brian Mitchell, the financial coordinator. Her voice gaining strength. I saw him do it multiple times. He thought he was alone after hours. But I would come back to retrieve things I had forgotten. I saw him at Emma's computer. Why didn't you report it at the time? Catherine closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears were there. He saw me one night, followed me to the parking lot, cornered me, said that if I opened my mouth, my family would suffer. I was scared. 2 weeks later, my car hit a pole. The brakes failed. I was in a coma for 6 months. I woke up this morning and the first thing my friend told me was about the trial, that Emma would be convicted today. Tears were now streaming down her face. I couldn't let that happen. She didn't do anything, nothing. Absolute silence. Do you have any way to prove what you're saying? Catherine hesitated. I don't have proof with me, but Brian was too cautious. He always kept everything. The prosecutor stood up, face red. Your Honor, based on this testimony, I request suspension of the charges while we open a formal investigation into Brian Mitchell. This will take a few days. Harrison looked at Emma, eyes closed, tears falling, clutching the rosary so tightly her hand shook. He looked at Catherine on the screen. 6 months in a coma, wakes up exactly when needed. He looked at the jury, then back at Emma. Charges temporarily suspended. The defendant will remain free while the investigation proceeds. We reconvene in 1 month? He struck the gavel. Emma opened her eyes. It wasn't a declaration of innocence yet, but it was the first real spark of hope in months. A month is a long time when you don't know whether your life is going to come back together or fall apart. Emma woke up every day with her stomach in knots. David called with updates, but there was never anything concrete. They're investigating, looking for evidence. Hey, Emma spent her nights praying her grandmother's rosary while sitting on the sofa bed. Rachel tried to cheer her up. It's going to work out. But even she didn't sound convinced. Harrison wasn't sleeping well either. He would wake up in the middle of the night expecting to smell roses again. It never returned. He tried to work, review cases, conduct hearings. But his mind always went back to Emma Lawson, to the blue rosary, to Catherine Ross, waking up at just the right moment. Thursday morning, 1 month later. The courtroom was packed again when Emma walked in. She wore the same blue blazer. Harrison struck the gavel, and silence dropped heavily over the room. Prosecutor Henderson stood. He looked at the papers in front of him for a long moment before speaking. "Your Honor," he stopped, took a deep breath. The investigation found significant evidence among Brian Mitchell's belongings, documents in his apartment, flash drives, material that confirms exactly the testimony of Catherine Ross. Emma closed her eyes. Tears were already starting to fall before he finished speaking. Brian Mitchell was arrested last night. He confessed to everything when confronted. Henderson paused, looked at Emma for the first time. He forged the signatures, used her login, made everything look like it was her. "I request the immediate dismissal of all charges against Emma Lawson." Harrison looked at Emma. Her hands were gripping the rosary so tightly it seemed like she might break the beads. "Emma Lawson, please stand." She opened her eyes. Tried to stand, but her legs were trembling so much she could barely stay upright. "All charges against you are formally dismissed. You are completely free. And this court apologizes for what you have gone through." Emma collapsed. She literally collapsed. Her legs gave out completely, and her attorney had to catch her before she hit the floor. The rosary slipped from her hands. The blue beads scattered across the floor, making a sound that echoed through the entire courtroom. Absolute silence. Harrison stepped down from the bench. Judges don't step down. Judges stay up there, distant, impartial. But Harrison stepped down. He walked to where Emma was. He crouched down, began gathering the beads one by one, too small in his hands, worn blue glass reflecting the light. The entire courtroom watched in silence. Harrison gathered the last bead, held the rosary in his hand, extended it toward Emma. She looked at him, tears streaming, tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then she whispered so softly only he could hear, "Thank you." Harrison didn't reply. There was nothing to say. 3 days later, Harrison was in the apartment alone. But for the first time in years, he wasn't reviewing case files. He wasn't thinking about work. He was just sitting, looking out the window, thinking about the scent of roses, about a woman waking up from a 6-month coma at the exact moment, about a blue rosary he once mocked and then returned with respect. Do you believe in coincidences? Harrison had believed in them his entire life. Only facts, only evidence, only what could be proven. 6 months later, Emma returned to school on the first day of the new semester. When she walked in, students and teachers were waiting in the courtyard. They applauded for 5 minutes without stopping. Catherine Ross came out of the coma with no after effects. The doctors called it luck. She called it a miracle. She went back to work 3 months later. Every Friday she has lunch with Emma at the same diner. Harrison Webb is still a judge in the same court. He conducts hearings the same way. Strict, impartial, fair. But one thing changed. On a Tuesday afternoon, a defendant waited for his verdict. He had a rosary in his hands. He whispered his prayer. The prosecutor was about to complain. Harrison raised his hand, asking for silence. He let the man pray. When the man finished and put the rosary away, Harrison struck the gavel and continued the session without saying a word. Sometimes the greatest transformations happen in silence. A judge who spent 28 years believing only in the law learned that there are forces in the universe that no legal code can explain. And a blue rosary became the instrument of something he will never be able to prove, but also never be able to deny. Before we finish, I want to invite you to join our prayer community for the Virgin Mary, a place of faith and hope where people from all over the world unite to pray and share the graces they've received. If you feel in your heart the desire to be part of this chain of prayer, click below and become a member of the channel today and come pray with us. And if you made it all the way here, to the end of the story of Harrison Webb and Emma Lawson, do one thing for me, write in the comments, Blue Rosary, the object he once humiliated and later returned with respect. I want to see how many hearts this story has truly reached, and every time I read those words, I'll know that one more person believes that miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs their hope renewed today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.